Mr. Lawson, this is a violation of Article 704. You have 30 days to pay the $550 fine. She thrust the document into my palm as if delivering a final judgment. I had cast my line into that lake every Saturday morning for the past 12 years. There were never any posted signs, never any permits required, and no one had ever raised an objection. I stared at the penalty notice, then at the calm water, then back at the paper, focusing on one empty box near the bottom, and I smiled, because Phyllis Harrington had just committed the costliest error of her entire career. My name is Paul Lawson. I'm 58 years old, a retired mechanical engineer, and by most measures, a low-key individual. I maintain my yard neatly, return tools promptly, and avoid public confrontations. I chose Maplewood Estates back in 2012 for one specific reason. The home on Lot 47 sat directly against Silver Creek Lake, a modest stretch of water fringed with willows and circled by a dirt trail. On my very first Saturday in the neighborhood, I carried down a worn folding chair and my fishing gear and settled onto the shore. 12 years later, I had not skipped a single weekend. The lake simply existed there. Locals strolled their dogs on the path. Children launched kites near the edge. Everyone treated it as shared territory, and no one had ever challenged that understanding. Until Phyllis Harrington arrived. Phyllis served as the HOA president, a former educator who approached the community bylaws with the reverence of holy text. She wore a shiny badge on a neck strap, kept a secretary armed with a clipboard, and pursued enforcement with near-religious zeal. Overgrown trash bins, holiday decorations, grass borders. Nothing escaped her notice. That Saturday morning, she showed up at 7:45 accompanied by Gerald Finch, the HOA secretary. She halted a short distance from my chair and declared, "Mr. Lawson, you are currently breaking Article 7.4, which prohibits unauthorized activity in shared zones, particularly water-based recreation such as fishing, absent a proper aquatic activity permit." Gerald extended the citation toward me. The figure printed in bold red ink read $550. I had resided here for 12 years and had never once encountered the term aquatic activity permit. So I posed a single question. Can you provide the official records proving the HOA owns or holds authority over this body of water? Phyllis paused briefly, then insisted the lake belonged to the community and that she owed no explanation of its own rules to any resident. With that, she spun around and departed. I remained seated for some time after their exit, the citation balanced on my leg. Then I examined the paper again, ignoring the dollar amount and studying the section marked location of violation. It reads simply Lake Area, Common Grounds, without any parcel number, assessor code, or formal property description. That detail stood out to me. For 30 years I had pored over blueprints and legal descriptions. In any legitimate document, location demanded exactness. This lacked precision. It was presumption presented as power. I folded the notice, slipped it into my pocket, packed up my rod, and headed back to the house. That night, I retrieved my original closing documents from 2012. My deed described only Lot 47. Nothing extra, nothing omitted. It made no reference to lake usage rights, yet crucially, it imposed no prohibition on lake activities either. Next, I opened my computer and accessed the county assessor's online records. When the entry for the lake parcel loaded, I sat up straighter. The listed owner was not Maplewood Estates HOA. In fact, no HOA entity appeared at all. The owner was Greenway Development LLC. Beside that entry sat a status update. Entity dissolved, March 2019. I dedicated the following afternoon to what I had always excelled at, constructing a clear picture from official papers rather than guesses. In under 2 hours, I gathered every public document connected to the lake parcel, APN 2847. The entire surface of Silver Creek Lake, plus a 30-foot surrounding buffer, had been kept by Greenway during the original subdivision in 2001. They sold the houses but evidently never handed over the lake itself. Then the company dissolved in 2019, leaving the parcel abandoned in the records. This revealed 3 critical facts. First, the HOA held no ownership of the lake. No deed, no lease, no management contract, no easement, no judicial ruling, nothing. Second, the rule Phyllis invoked, Article 7.4, applied exclusively to common areas as defined in the CCNRs, land formally deeded to and upheld by the HOA. APN 2847 had never been deeded to the HOA. Therefore, according to the association's own rules, it was not a common area. Third, state regulations made clear that property from a dissolved corporation did not automatically fall under HOA authority simply because it was nearby. It stayed part of the former entity's holdings until correctly conveyed, meaning the parcel remained available for legitimate purchase by anyone, including me. The next morning, I phoned my son David, a civil attorney. I asked him just one thing. Was my reading of this correct? He confirmed it was. Then he used the word I had been waiting for, actionable. That same afternoon, I contacted Sandra Okafor, a respected local lawyer experienced in resolving property conflicts. I shared my compiled notes, the assessor details, and the original governing documents. She reviewed the materials and remarked, "Plenty of people walk in upset about an HOA citation, but you're among the few who arrived this thoroughly prepared." I explained my goal clearly, the quickest legal route to acquiring APN 2847. She replied, "Give me 48 hours. While Sandra investigated, Phyllis remained active. Within 3 days, the HOA distributed a community compliance alert that singled me out as a resident formally cited under Article 7.4. It offered no description of the violation, attached no supporting evidence, and made no mention of ownership. It simply highlighted my name and the rule number, sufficient to imply wrongdoing without encouraging questions. A handful of neighbors reached out. I gave each the same calm response. I had received the notice and was looking into the matter. Sandra contacted me sooner than expected. She had located the firm managing leftover assets from Greenway's estate. The lake parcel remained listed among them, along with several years of accumulated taxes. They were eager to sell. She also shared another detail. In 2021, an individual purporting to speak for the HOA had approached the estate seeking transfer of lake management rights. The inquiry lacked any legal foundation or financial proposal and had been dismissed. I didn't need to ask who initiated it. Phyllis had long known the HOA did not own the lake. She had attempted to claim control, been unsuccessful, and continued behaving as though the attempt had never occurred. Sandra quoted the listed price. I gazed out my kitchen window toward the water and said, "Proceed." 3 weeks after receiving the citation, I sat down with Sandra at Whitmore and Associates. The deal was straightforward. Greenway's estate required the sale to settle outstanding taxes. No rival bids existed. The title review came back clear. No loans, no lawsuits, no encumbrances beyond the taxes, and crucially, no recorded claim from the HOA. One additional document caught my eye in the folder, the 2021 letter on HOA stationery, requesting an administrative transfer of lake management rights. Phyllis had signed it herself as the association's authorized representative. No legal basis was referenced, no payment proposed, merely an effort to build a record that might appear legitimate if left unchallenged. I read it carefully once, set it aside, and completed the purchase agreement. As the meeting concluded, the representative extended his hand and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Lawson. Parcel APN 2847 now belongs to you." I took the scenic route home along the lake and stopped for a moment. The surface lay mirror calm, sunlight filtering through the willow branches. I stood there in silence, reflecting on how near Phyllis had been to succeeding. All she had required was for me to respond the way most people do when presented with an official-looking penalty. Complain briefly, pay up, and forget about it. Instead, I had noticed that empty field. A week later, after the deed was officially recorded and the county records updated with my name as owner, Sandra and I prepared private property notices that met all local regulations. I then engaged a surveying team and a professional sign maker. The primary sign stated, "Private property, parcel APN 2847, owner Paul R. Lawson. Access by permission only." On Wednesday morning, the surveyors outlined the boundaries. I sat once more in my folding chair, coffee in one hand and fishing rod resting against the other. Neighbors passing by slowed down. Most glanced at the new signs and continued on their way. Marcus Webb, who lived a few houses away, paused, studied the sign thoroughly, and commented, "You handled that correctly, Paul." That same afternoon, I heard brakes squeal near the road. Phyllis stood at the edge, staring at the sign, as though it were written in an alien tongue she rejected. Then she strode purposefully to my front door and rapped sharply, like someone convinced she held the upper hand. When I answered, she announced, "You have no authority to post those signs. That remains HOA common property. Take them down at once, or I will begin official action." I stepped back and motioned her inside. On my dining table lay 3 key papers, a notarized copy of the recorded deed, the county recorder's verification sheet, and a printed image from the public assessor's site displaying APN 2847 under my ownership. I passed her the verification sheet. "This is the officially recorded deed, Mrs. Harrington, filed 12 days ago. It has been publicly viewable since last Thursday. She scanned it once, set it down, then picked it up again. I observed her reading my name in the owner field a second time, and I saw the change in her expression. The instant someone understands the foundation beneath them was never stable. Without speaking further, she turned and left. 2 days after that, she raised the stakes. A message went up on the neighborhood online board cautioning residents about a questionable property takeover at the lake. It avoided using my name directly, yet the target was unmistakable. It spoke of dishonest manipulation of legal technicalities and an effort to convert shared space into private holdings. The accompanying photos were deliberately framed to omit the parcel number and ownership details. All you noticed were the bold words, "private property," in large white lettering, arranged in a way that seemed confrontational instead of official. The neighborhood responded precisely as she had hoped. Residents grew anxious about losing their access. A few echoed her accusations. Others went door to door sharing her account in person. An unsigned note showed up under my front door. It read, "Return the lake to the community." I folded it neatly and placed it in the same drawer where I had stored the original citation. Then I contacted Sandra. She suggested holding off on any defamation claim for now. Instead, she proposed a simpler approach: make the records public. So I created my own post. No attacks, no grand statements, just the deed, the assessor's information, the applicable CC&R sections, and a single clear line. I acquired parcel APN 2847 through a lawful public transaction. All records are filed with Harlow County and open for anyone to check. That post began to break apart the narrative Phyllis had constructed. Some residents continued supporting her, but others began raising the question that should have been asked at the start. If the HOA truly owned the lake, where was the supporting documentation? The morning after my post, I reached out to the security company and requested a quote for a full perimeter camera setup on the property. 6 cameras, complete coverage around the edges, cloud backup, clear warning signs, and no gaps. The system became operational on a Thursday evening at 2:17 a.m. The next Friday, my phone vibrated with a motion notification. I opened the application and saw 2 figures crossing my land in dark attire. One was attempting to yank out a boundary marker. The other was approaching the large sign carrying a spray paint can. I dialed 911 and reported an active trespass. I stayed inside. I sat on the side of my bed and monitored the live video. As they moved beneath a trail light, I immediately identified the first person, Gerald Finch, the HOA secretary. The second individual was Tyler Sims, the 24-year-old son of board member Carol Sims. 2 police cruisers pulled up quietly. Their headlights illuminated the path and spotlighted both men in plain view. Gerald attempted to flee and covered roughly 30 feet before stumbling over an exposed willow root and falling heavily. Tyler remained motionless, spray can still gripped tightly. Once the officers had the area under control, I stepped out with my laptop and displayed the recordings. 6 coordinated camera angles, time-stamped, saved remotely, impossible to edit. Both individuals were arrested that night on charges of criminal trespass and criminal damage. By morning, Sandra had reviewed the police report. She submitted the civil lawsuit for damages that same afternoon. That incident report affected the neighborhood more powerfully than any explanation I could have offered, because now everyone faced a straightforward question. If the HOA's purpose was to safeguard the community, why was its secretary trespassing on private land at 2:17 in the morning? 2 weeks later, Sandra and I completed a formal property access policy for APN 2847. The lake stayed under private ownership, but I chose to grant recreational use to Maplewood Estates residents for walking, fishing, and non-motorized boats at no cost, managed through a simple registration process. Access could be withdrawn and a permanent ban list existed. Gerald Finch was included on it, Tyler Sims was included on it, and Phyllis Harrington was included as well, due to her established pattern of improper enforcement and her earlier documented awareness that the HOA possessed no legal control over the lake. The civil matters progressed rapidly afterward. Gerald reached a settlement, covered the damages, admitted to the trespass, and stepped down from the HOA board. Tyler took a plea deal. Carol Sims resigned soon after. Then additional details began to emerge. I opened my home on Saturday afternoon to any neighbor who wished to examine the full collection of documents. 18 people arrived. I spread everything out. The initial citation, the assessor records, the CCNR provisions, the Whitmore communications, the deed transfer, the police report, and the settlement papers. I delivered no monologue. I simply responded to their questions. Marcus remarked, "I've lived here 15 years. Never once did any board member present a single document about this lake. You're the first one who has." Janet Kowalski glanced up after an hour and said, "I owe you an apology, Paul. I shouldn't have left that note." I told her honestly. Rumors always travel quicker than paperwork. 1 week later, the HOA convened an emergency session to address the alleged unauthorized privatization of a shared resource. Only 6 residents attended. When Phyllis attempted to argue her position, someone cut in and posed the single relevant question. Can you produce any document, deed, easement, management contract, anything at all, that proves HOA authority over that lake? She referred to long-time community habits. She spoke of responsibility. She mentioned expectations, but she had no actual document. The meeting ended without any decision. Over the following 3 months, the repercussions played out fully. 11 residents submitted formal grievances to the HOA ethics panel. Hearings took place. Phyllis offered explanations but provided no records. At the membership vote to oust her, 31 households participated, the highest attendance the association had ever seen. The result was 23-8 in favor of removal. Marcus Webb was appointed interim president. A week afterward, he visited my home and explained that the new board sought a clear, formal access agreement, something equitable, transparent, and legally sound. I informed him that Sandra and I had already prepared one. 3 days later, we signed it together at my dining table. Maplewood Estates residents would enjoy free daytime access for walking, fishing, and non-motorized watercraft, following standard behavior guidelines. One provision could not be changed. The permanent exclusion list already filed with the county could not be modified, suspended, or bypassed by any future HOA decision. Marcus reviewed it, looked it up, and added his signature. 6 months after Phyllis had delivered that $550 citation, I sat once again in my folding chair on the eastern shore of Silver Creek Lake. Marcus joined me with his own fishing rod in the water. 2 children from the Kowalski family ran across the grass behind us. No patrols, no clipboards, no shiny badge glinting in the sunlight. After some time, Marcus inquired, "Did you ever regret any part of it?" I considered the question carefully before replying. "No," I said. "Not because I succeeded, but because I handled it properly." Phyllis placed her house on the market 4 months after the removal vote and received an acceptable offer within 2 weeks. The morning the moving van pulled up, I stood at my kitchen window holding a cup of coffee and observed it depart without fanfare. In my jacket pocket rested the original citation, still folded tightly from the day I chose not to pay it. I removed it, opened it once more, and examined again the empty box where the parcel number should have appeared. That captured the entire situation. Not the dollar figure, not the offense, not even the lake itself. Just one blank space on one seemingly official form, a missing piece that revealed the facts, if you took the time to spot it. Because this account was never truly about fishing. It was about what occurs when someone confuses appearances with real power, and what happens when a reserved individual chooses to examine the original sources. Phyllis possessed the badge, the position, the plan, and the certainty. I possessed public records, a methodical lawyer, and the determination to trace the documentation to its conclusion. And in the end, that proved sufficient. Not one shouted word, not one personal attack, just records, readiness, and evidence. The first takeaway is straightforward. The original source material always outweighs the individual who twists it for personal advantage. The second is that staying quiet is not the same as weakness. Sometimes it is simply readiness. The third is that genuine authority requires no props. It withstands examination by public records. And the fourth is that if you sense someone about to overstep, secure your position beforehand, not afterward. Most individuals would have simply paid that fine. I understand the reason. But occasionally, someone studies a document, spots what is absent, and recognizes that the whole framework bearing down on them rested on paperwork no one anticipated would be scrutinized. That is exactly what took place here. And that is how a reserved man equipped with filing costs, a diligent attorney, and a county database brought down an HOA president who confused loud enforcement with actual legal standing.